Andrew was in a bad mood. And it wasn't because he failed his economics exam and would now need to retake it. The reason lay elsewhere. It was rooted in Andrew's past. It all started with a morning conversation with his uncle Isaac, who shared a truly shocking piece of news over breakfast. It turned out that Andrew's father was involved in the disappearance of his mother, who left the family 20 years ago. Andrew was only 3 years old at the time, so he barely remembered his mother. During the conversation, Uncle Isaac didn't tell his nephew the whole truth, hinting at things that sparked even more interest in Andrew. Why did he even tell me this? What was he trying to achieve? Did he want me to lose my balance and make me nervous? Andrew confided in his best friend, Simon. The man pondered for a moment before replying. If I were you, I wouldn't rush to blame your father and believe your uncle's words. Who knows what the situation was? It's been 20 years. I think your first step should be to talk to your father. No, that's out of the question. My father stubbornly refuses to tell me anything. If I'm going to discuss this with anyone, it would only be my grandmother. Although I have a date with April today, I'm not sure I have enough time to visit my grandma first, Andrew said doubtfully. Simon shook his head, but refrained from commenting. He understood that being an outsider, it was better for him to refrain from meddling in someone else's family affairs, even if it was his best friend's family. After bidding farewell to Simon, Andrew headed home. He felt a heaviness in his heart, but he didn't want to talk to his father about such an awkward topic. George Miller was a difficult man who tried to keep everything under his control. Running his own business, he had achieved considerable success, raising his social status several levels. Despite the fact that his father provided Andrew with a childhood filled with luxury and wealth, the son still harbored resentment and rarely opened up to him completely. Now, on his way home, Andrew puzzled over how to tactfully ask his father about his mother. How could she have abandoned him when he was so little? Why did she leave the family? There were more questions than answers, and the realization of this made Andrew feel very uncomfortable. Trying to distract himself from his sad thoughts, Andrew thought about April, whom he'd been dating for the past 3 months. Despite the seemingly serious nature of their relationship, the young couple hadn't introduced their parents yet, postponing that nerve-wracking moment for later. Deep down, Andrew feared that his father, known for his unpleasant demeanor, might not approve of April. At that moment, his smartphone vibrated in his pocket, notifying him of an incoming message. Andrew smiled and reached for his pocket. As he had expected, the message was from April. She was saying that she would like him for dinner at her home. His eyes lit up with joy. Well, finally, I'll get to meet her family. We've been dating for 3 months, but we're still behaving like strangers, Andrew thought. At that moment, a curious idea popped into his head. Andrew decided that before heading over to Rachel's place, he would definitely visit his grandmother and talk to her about his mother. Charlotte Miller lived in a residential area, so it was quite easy for him to pay her a visit. After making a quick lunch for himself, Andrew took a shower, put on his best clothes, and set off on his way. Grandma Charlotte was always delighted to see her grandson and made sure to convey that sentiment every time they saw each other. Despite being Andrew's grandmother on his father's side, she didn't hesitate to criticize his father in front of her grandson. Seeing her grandson at the doorstep, Mrs. Miller smiled and hugged him tightly. You've been a rare guest at my home lately. How's school? Are things going well in your personal life? She asked, pouring tea for her guest. Sorry, Grandma, I never seem to have enough time. I'm sure you get it. I actually came here for a reason. You see, the other day, Uncle Isaac mentioned that it was my father's fault that Mom left us. So, I wanted to ask you if that's true. Or is Uncle Isaac exaggerating again? Andrew asked. Mrs. Miller paused for a moment, causing a dense network of wrinkles to appear on her forehead. You know, dear, I'll be completely honest with you. Uncle Isaac told you the truth. Your mother Nancy didn't leave the family on her own. She was forced out, and your father did it. Yes, you heard it right. But why did Dad do that? Why did he make my mother abandon me? Andrew couldn't contain his emotions. Charlotte Miller looked at her grandson reproachfully before continuing. Your mother was always an excellent economist, and it was she who helped your father reach great heights in his business. But when George achieved success, her intellectual superiority became a burden to him. By that time, you were already 3 years old. When he filed for divorce, George did everything to ensure that the court ruled in his favor, and he got complete custody over you. Nancy, on the other hand, was forbidden from coming closer than a mile to his house, thereby cutting off her connection with her own son. Grandma's story shocked Andrew. For all those years, he'd been living with the belief that his mother had willingly left him and his father. But in reality, George Miller had done everything to separate mother and son for the sake of his own ambitions. "Why don't we have a single photo of Mom in our house?" Andrew asked, raising another uncomfortable question. To his surprise, his grandmother was prepared for such a question. She got up from the table and went into the next room. After a couple of minutes, she returned, holding an old photo with folded edges. "Here, take it. This is your mother, dear. Apparently, your father threw away and hid all the photos, but as you can see, I still managed to save one." Having taken the photo in his hands, Andrew looked with interest at the graceful woman in her 30s, captured with the bouquet of roses. "She's so beautiful. I knew nothing about everything that happened," Andrew thought, placing the photo in the side pocket of his jacket. "Thank you, Grandma. I should probably get going. I have a date today, so I can't be late. My fiancé wouldn't like it," Andrew said with a smile, getting up from the table. Charlotte Miller hugged her grandson goodbye and escorted him to the door. Having waved goodbye to his grandmother, Andrew hurried towards the city center. That's where April lived with her parents. He was running a bit late, but he still believed that he could make it on time. He picked up the pace and approached the intersection, where he had to wait for the traffic light to turn green. Suddenly, something strange caught his peripheral vision. Having turned his head, Andrew saw an elderly woman who clearly needed help. He approached the woman and took her hand before asking, "Are you okay? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" The woman was rather embarrassed. She looked at Andrew and whispered, catching her breath, "No, there's no need. I have some pills in my purse in the side pocket. Can you see them? Please get them for me." Andrew readily fulfilled the old woman's request, but didn't let go of her hand, fearing that she might feel unwell again and lose consciousness. "Let me help you get home. It's no trouble for me," the man offered, trying not to think about the fact that he needed to get to his date. "Thank you, but you're probably busy, aren't you? I'm sure I can get there on my own. I'll take breaks on my way," the elderly woman murmured, looking embarrassed. But there was no persuading Andrew at that point. Having firmly taken the elderly woman by the arm, he headed in the direction she indicated. Andrew knew he would be late for his date with April, but helping the distressed woman was far more important to him at that moment. During the conversation with the old woman, Andrew learned that her name was Barbara Simpson and she lived on Park Street. "Wow, that's fortunate. That's exactly where I need to go. April's mother's house is located on that street," flashed through his mind. But when Mrs. Simpson brought Andrew to her doorstep, he felt uneasy. "No, this can't be happening. Am I hallucinating? How is this possible? Is it some kind of coincidence? Or did I get the address wrong?" Andrew's surprise had a simple explanation. Barbara Simpson's house number coincided with the numbers mentioned by his fiancée. Then the door swung open, and April appeared on the threshold. "Andrew, why are you running late, and where did you meet my grandmother?" April exclaimed. April's astonishment was so genuine that Andrew had no doubts about her relationship with Barbara Simpson. But what awaited him inside the house made him believe in the existence of supernatural powers. In the living room, Andrew was greeted by his mother, who had changed over the past 20 years, but still looked a lot like the gray-eyed beauty from the photo. "Mom? Mother? Look, I have your photo, see?" Andrew exclaimed tearfully, holding out the picture to the woman. Only then did Nancy realize that her own son had come to court her daughter. "Mom, does that mean we're brother and sister?" April asked, struggling to hold back her tears. Tension filled the room, and then Nancy spoke. "No, my dear, you're not my biological daughter. After Andrew's father kicked me out of the house and filed for divorce, I married a man who'd already had a little daughter from his previous marriage. Your biological mother died during childbirth, so I adopted you and became the closest person to you after your father. So you and Andrew can safely get married." April and Andrew exchanged glances, their faces filled with happiness. Soon they were all sitting around the family table, discussing the upcoming wedding, which, according to the groom, would take place regardless of anything. Andrew knew that his father wouldn't be pleased with this news, but at that moment he was only concerned about his own happiness, for which he was ready to fight to the end. Without even trying to, Andrew had found his mother, who turned out to be the adoptive mother of his fiancée. A month later, the young couple got married, and their wedding ceremony would be remembered by the guests for its joyful moments and an atmosphere of true happiness. It was rumored that by that time, April was already carrying Andrew's child. Only time would tell whether this was true or not. All that is left for us to do now is rejoice for the newlyweds who overcame so many obstacles to become a happily married couple.